Dalet Amud Aleph. So continuing on with Dovid HaMelech, he was learning the whole night, Chatzos Laila, Akum, and he was learning the whole night, and then the Chacham came to him in the morning and to deal with the Tzorchei Tzibur. So Dalet Amud Aleph on top, V'nayo ben Yehoyada zeh Sanhedrin. So it says that his officers came to him, Benayo ben Yehoyada. Who was he? He was the Av Bezdin. He was the head of the Bezdin. V'Avyasar Ela Urim V'Tumim. He was the Kohen Gadol, and as prior to going to war, so Dovid HaMelech had to ask Rashus from the Bezdin, from the Sanhedrin. He asked in the Urim V'Tumim, V'cheinu Omer U'V'nayo ben Yehoyada ala Kreis V'ala Plesi. So V'nayo ben Yehoyada, who represents the Sanhedrin, was above the Kreisi and the Plesi. So first, the Rishus was asked from the Sanhedrin, and then they inquired from the Kreisi, Plesi, the Urim V'Tumim, if they would be successful in the war. Why was the Urim V'Tumim called Kreisi Plesi? Kreisi shekorsim divreim. Kreisi was called because they said the words precisely. Korsim divreim. They were exact, they were precise. Plesi shmuf loim divreim. What they said was wondrous. And then they summoned Yoav, the general, and then they went to war. So that's what we learned previously on Daf Gimel Amud Beis, that they came tzorchei amcha, they need parnasa, and they went to war against Amaleki, against the people that were plundering the lands. So the order is Sanhedrin, Urim V'Tumim, and then the general to go to war. One might ask that why go to the Sanhedrin first? Inquire of the Urim V'Tumim, and if the Urim V'Tumim says you're not going to be successful, well, it ends right there. Why have a discussion in the Sanhedrin and get Rishus from Sanhedrin and then ask the Urim V'Tumim? One would think that the first thing to do is ask the Urim V'Tumim, and if the Urim V'Tumim, the crazy places, say that they will not succeed, then there's nothing more to discuss. Perhaps the pshat is, Al Pi Taisus in Gittin Daf Samachet Samad Aleph, that one does not inquire of the Urim V'Tumim unless it's absolutely necessary and unless there's no alternative. So, if the Sanhedrin would not have given Rishus, it would not be proper to ask the Urim V'Tumim. First, one would have to ask the Sanhedrin, Dovid HaMelech would have to ask the Sanhedrin, get the Rishus, get their approval, and see if perhaps Sanhedrin has any other eitzah to, as far as the parnasa is concerned, the economic condition, and then to ask the Urim V'Tumim once there's no alternative but to go to war, and there is Rishus from Sanhedrin, then one asks the Urim V'Tumim. Let's see back in the more so we said that Dovid HaMelech, we said that there was a harp that was suspended above his bed, and he woke up at Chatzos. The pasuk says, Ura kavaydi ura hanevel v'chinor a'ira shachar. So Ura, the nevel v'chinor, and I will awaken the shachar, the daylight, the daybreak. Dovid HaMelech was up already from Chatzos. Rabbi Zera Omar, so we had a question earlier on Daf Gimel Amud Beis, that how could Dovid HaMelech know when Chatzos was if Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know? So another different teretz is given now. So Rabbi Zera says, Omar Moshe Elohim Havayada. No, Moshe Rabbeinu did know when Chatzos was. David Nami Havayada. And Dovid HaMelech also knew when Chatzos, when midnight was. They came into David Havayada, Kinar Lamale. If he knew when Chatzos was, what was the purpose of the Kinar of the harp? The Gemara answers, Lesur Mishnah, saying, to wake him up. It was an alarm clock, but he knew he could determine when Chatzos was. The Gemara became the Moshe Havayada, Lamale Lamemer Chatzos. Well, if he knew, then why did Moshe Rabbeinu say Kachatzos, which implies approximately Chatzos, if he really knew exactly when Chatzos was? So more answers, Moshe Kasavar Shemayitu Atzlenige Para V'Yemer Moshe Badoyu. He thought that they might make a mistake, and if he says Chatzos, then in their calculation of Chatzos they might make a mistake, and then think that he made a mistake. Rather say, it's preferable to say, I don't know, rather than say you know and you might be caught in a mistake. So even though Moshe Rabbeinu did know, but rather than have people think that he made a mistake and then lose his credibility, he said kachatzais. Rav Ashi gives a different teretz. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu say kachatzais if he knew exactly when chatzais was? So he says, Amar bepalga uta d'leisa nagyar beisavakoi. What he was referring to is he was on the 13th of Nisan, or the reference was on the 13th of Nisan, now saying that what will happen, foretelling what will happen in the next day, the following day, the 14th of Nisan. V'hachi kamer Moshe Yisrael. Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Rebbeinu said, Lemachar kachatzos halayla ki ha'idna, tomorrow, like the same period of time tonight, chatzos tonight of the 13th, tomorrow at the same time, ani yotze b'sech Mitzrayim, that's when Makas B'chayris will be. So the chatzos doesn't mean approximately, it means in a time that's similar to the time that's right now. Tomorrow at the same time as tonight. The Dovid Shaman Nafshki Chosidoni. So continuing on with Dovid Melech, and he woke up early, and etc. So the pasuk says, Le Dovid, he beseeches the Rebbeinu Shalom to protect him because he's a Chosid. Levi Rav Yitzchak Amar. So what is the Chasidus that David and Melech is referring to that makes it worthy for him to be protected? One says, Am I not a chosid? They all go and stay in bed and wake up late and they pamper themselves. As far as me, I wake up at midnight to give you praises. As opposed to the other kings that indulge themselves and pamper themselves, I wake up in midnight, I afflict myself, I wake up at midnight to praise him. That's one opinion. The other opinion is Kachamar Davlivnei Kodesh Baruch Hu. Ribono shel olam lo chasid ani, am I not a chasid shekol malchei mizrach u'marav yeshim agudas b'chvodim? They all sit together in the royal gatherings. V'ani yarai meluchlachas badam b'shvir v'shilya, and I make my hands, soil my hands, examining the blood of the shir and the shilya, the embryos, the afterbirths, kedei latar isha labala, to determine is she tor, is she tome, is it a birth? If a woman gives birth, then there's a period of time of tumah, and I engage in this and soil my hands to be matayar and isha labala. So you see the difference between myself and the other kings. There's an interesting ha'or over here that the halach is that a melech shemochel al kvoida ain't kvoida mochel. A rav ha'mochel al kvoida can be mochel on his covet, but a king cannot be mochel on his covet. He can't be mochel on his covet. And yet Dovid Melech did not conduct themselves like royalty in this regard, because he personally paskined on the Tumah Datara and Yorai Mulchachas Badam. Some say that the answer is that because for Kavod Shemayim, it is allowed, it is permitted for a king to be mochel on his covet. Back in the Gemara V'lo and David Melech says, and furthermore, look at the difference between me and the kings in this regard, and furthermore, Elakol Ma'ashani Oiseh Ani Nimlach Mefivoishes Rebbe. I degrade myself that whatever I do when I paskin, I consult with Mefiboishes, my Rebbe. I ask him and inquire him, did I paskin properly? Was it proper the way I done in Dinei Torah and Dinei Mominus and Tumah V'Tara in the different Dinei Torah? And I was not embarrassed. I was not embarrassed to ask from him if I paskin correctly. The pasuk says, I'll speak in your halachas neged melachim, in front of kings, and I'm not embarrassed. Literally would imply that David Melech discussed Torah in front of the other kings, and he wasn't embarrassed. The way Rashi's mashma over here is that it's a reference over here, neged melachim, the king that we're referring to is Mephibosheth, who descended from royalty, was a Talmid Chacham, was considered a king. And he wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't embarrassed to consult and ask of Mephibosheth whether he passed correctly. His real name was Ishbosheth, not Mephibosheth. V'lam and Nikrashon Mephibosheth. Why was it called Mephibosheth? So it was called Mephibosheth. From his mouth was Bosheth. It was an embarrassment to Dovid HaMelech and Halacha, because sometimes he used to correct Dovid HaMelech, and Dovid HaMelech used to sometimes get, so to speak, embarrassed from that. That's why it was called Mephibosheth. Lefichach zocha Dovid v'yatsa mimena kilov, and on account of that, that Dovid HaMelech degraded himself for the Torah. He was zoicha to a son Kilov, who was even a greater Talmid Chacham. V'amar Rav Yochanan lo Kilov Shmuel Daniel Shmoy. His real name was Daniel. V'lama nikra Shmoy Kilov Shoyim Machlem Pnei Mephibosheth B'Halacha. He was called Kilov because Kilg Machlem, he embarrassed the Mephibosheth B'Halacha. Some say that Kilov is Rashi Tevas, Kil Machlem of he was Machlem, that he was Machlem the Mephibosheth, he was Machlem Pnei Mephibosheth B'Halacha, he was Rashi Tevas of Kil of. V'alav Amar Shloima b'chachmasa b'ni im chacham libecha yismach libi gam ani. V'omer chacham b'ni v'samach libi v'ashivi charvei dover. My son, if you are a chacham, you will gladden my heart, and I will be able to respond to those that embarrass me. It's interesting pshat that Mephibosheth, that it says that his name wasn't really Mephibosheth. It was Ishbosheth. One shot on it is that the Gemara makes a point of stressing that, and because it says that Rebbe said that Dovid HaMelech said Mephibosheth's Rebbe. Now, really, it's in Hilchos Koved of a Rav. One does not say Mephibosheth's Rebbe. One addresses his Rebbe by saying Rebbe first, Rebbe Mephibosheth. But Dovid HaMelech said Mephibosheth's Rebbe. So in Hilchos Kibud of Koved of his Rav, how did Dovid HaMelech address him that way? And therefore they say the pshat is that it wasn't really his name. His name was Ishbosheth, so therefore it was permitted to address him without calling him Rebbe first. Fragte Gemara of it, Dovid, Mikor Lenafshe Chosid, Dovid HaMelech, it said, the Pasuk said, that Dovid HaMelech says, am I not a Chosid? Lule Shama Nafshki Chosid Ani, to refer to himself as a Chosid, is that so, that Dovid HaMelech really referred to himself as a Chosid, V'aksiv, Lule Hemanti, Lirois Betuv Hashem, Be'eretz Chaim. Had I not had Amunah and trust that I would see Olam Haba. However, there has nekudas on top of lulay, and when they're nekudas, it's mimayit. It minimizes the implication of the word. So why are there nekudas on lulay? I have bitochen that you will repay tzaddikim l'asilovai. They'll have olam haba, and they'll have the just rewards. But I don't know if I'm going to have a chelik in this olam haba with the tzaddikim. So you see, he was uncertain of his tzidkos. The previous pasuk we brought down, he refers to himself as a chassid. So he doesn't know any yedeim yesh li chelik b'nei imla. More answers shemi yiger mechet. He's worried that perhaps there will be a chet in the future. At the moment, he's a chosid ani, but what the future will bring, no one can say. And therefore, he did not have full confidence that he would get olam haba, because who knows what the rest of his life, what would it be, how he would conduct himself during the remainder of his life. And we see this concept elsewhere. Rav Yaakov Bar Idi Rami asks a contradiction of stira. The Rabbeinu Shalom promises Yaakov Avinu that he will protect him, he will be with him wherever he goes. However, it says Vayira Yaakov Ma'od, but when he encountered Esav, he was full of fear. So he was afraid, even though the Rabbeinu Shalom promised that he would protect him. So why is that? So maybe from the time of the Rabbeinu Shalom's promise until now, maybe there was a chet, and then maybe he was no longer worthy of that promise, of that protection. So that's why he had fear. And similarly with Dovid HaMelech, at the point when he said that Shama Nafshki Choser Ani, at that point he was at that Madrega. But what will be by the end of his life? Lulay, there's Nakudais, that he had some trepidation and fear as whether or not he would be worthy of to be with the tzaddikim in Olam Haba. Kinasanya, we see this concept that Garma Chet, that in fact the Chet causes one to lose a promise, Chas v'Shalom, because it says in the Pasuk Ad Yavaram Hashem Ad Yavaram Zukanis. It says by the Kriyas Yamsuf Ad Yavar Hashem Ad Yavar Zukanisa, a double lashon, until your nation passes, the nation that you acquired, which seemed to imply that there will be great nisim. There will be the great twice, that 2 times Bnei Yisrael, colleagues will be zoicha to the great nisim when they have the redemption. Ad Yavaram Hashem Zubi Rishayna. That's the first coming into Eretz Yisrael. That's Yetzias Mitzrayim, the first coming to Eretz Yisrael. They had the great nisim of Yamsov, Kriyas Yamsov, and all the great nisim that they had when they, at the first biyah that they came into Eretz Yisrael. Ad Yavram Zukanisa, the second mentioning of it, refers to Zubiyah Shniya, was referred to the second time they came into Eretz Yisrael after the Golus of Bavel, the first Churban Beis HaMikdash, and the coming into Eretz Yisrael from Bavel. They should have been Zoicha to the same type of great miracles that they had when they left Mitzrayim and they came the first time. Mikan Amr Chachamim Ruah Yisrael Yasus Lam Neis B'mei Ezra Kederach Shenaslam B'mei Yeshu Ben Nun. They should have had and were worthy of having the great miracles at the time of Ezra in the same way, the same type of miracles and the same madrega as Yeshu Ben Nun. Ela Shagora Machet. But they lost it because they were not worthy because of the chatoim that they did. They lost that. So that's why Dovid HaMelech, that's why he said Lulei, an uncertainty, will he really be Zoicha?